good afternoon. I'm Will van der Hart, and it's brilliant to welcome you here to the Good Leader Podcast live. And we are actually here at Leader Summit in Nottingham. Amazing. I didn't know if that was going to work, but that worked brilliantly. So thanks, everyone. It's such a privilege to be here, and we've gathered over 800 leaders from over 200 churches to be part of a gathering to explore what good leadership looks like and to be inspired and hopefully envisioned to see more of the kingdom at work in our nation and through our churches. And it's an absolute delight and honor for me to welcome our first guest to the Good Leader Live today. That's Ariana Walker. Ariana, welcome.
Good to be here.
It's great. Now, we've known each other for over 20 years, which is slightly frightening.
Ages.
No,
Yes,
I mean,
20 years.
it's 20 years, isn't it? Yeah. And do you want to say a bit, like we first connected over your ministry. It was quite early days with what was Mercy UK.
Yeah.
And just say a bit about what you were doing.
We were, at the time, running a residential home for young women with life-controlling issues, eating disorders, self-harming, depression, the effects of abuse. And we just opened, I think, and you and Rob came to visit us. And we very quickly realized what a synergy there was between what God was stirring in our hearts for the kind of Christian mental health landscape. And that's just developed since then. And actually, Mercy UK doesn't run the home anymore. We have taken everything that we did for 18 years in the home and now put it all online. And we are very much a mental health charity for Christians and are very excited about all the developments that have been happening over the last 5 years in our ministry.
When you first started, conceptually, that you were going to run a residential home for young women with life-controlling issues. Just say a bit about how that vision first came to you and how that developed, because you actually had an incredible centre in Yorkshire. I mean, a beautiful site. You were hosting lots and lots of young women there. It was with lots of therapeutic intervention. Yeah,
we still have the beautiful site. We just use it differently now. But to be honest, when people do what I did and do, it's usually for personal reasons. And for me, I didn't start the concept. It started in America in 1983. I pioneered it over here in the UK 21 years ago now. And it all came about because my sister needed a place like that. My sister, we were raised in a Christian home, when she was just 10 years between us, when she was 12, she just started behaving very differently. And the framework we had as a family was she was rebellious, and backslidden, walking away from God, didn't want to go to church, in with the wrong crowd. That was the language we had to describe her behavior. And for 3 years, that's what it became. She started taking drugs, she started staying out. She was just wild and rebellious. And at 15, my parents asked whether she could come and live with me and my husband. And my response was absolutely not. But about 6 months prior to that, I'd heard Nancy Alcorn, the president and founder of Mercy, speak at my church. And I had, be very careful about what you say yes to in those moments in meetings. I just put my hand up with tears streaming down my face. I said, God, if there's any way I can be involved in reaching people like that who need that, then please let that be me. And 6 months later, I get that phone call and God reminded me by saying, I thought you said yes. I'm like, well, I said yes to countless nameless, faceless young women in a home that doesn't exist yet. I didn't realize the first home I'd ever open would be my own, and the first young woman I'd ever come across who would need it would be my own sister. And so that's how it started. She went off to America to be the first young woman from the UK to be accepted onto the program over there, came back 7 months later. God had changed her heart, which changed her life. And she now is the COO of Mercy UK, soon to be the new CEO of Mercy UK. Big announcement there, everybody. You heard it here first.
Wow. I mean, that's worthy of a big round of applause. And obviously, I know your sister Debbie well, and she's an incredible leader and an amazing inspiration. Yep. And she has been at the forefront of that work of seeing transformation in the lives of young women for this period of time too. Yeah. When you think about your journey in leadership, obviously that began at home, and I think so often, as you've spoken into that, so often our journey, our personal journey of faith, begins with us. We're transformed, and then we long for the transformation of others. You've you've not dried up, like my experience of you haven't run out of energy for that. And in a sense, like when I hear you speaking or we meet at conferences, we do work together, you're still one of the most passionate people I know in this space. And we want to think a bit more about that. We heard a bit this morning about the sort of the challenge of keeping going into older life, and we both have opinions, I think, about balance and well-being in that area. But tell me, how do you keep that passion alive? You saw Debbie come to faith, you saw her find healing and wholeness, but you didn't let go of a vision.
No. Well, let me actually talk a little bit about passion, because I think it's a really interesting thing, because I am very passionate, and passion is a real benefit, I think, if you're a passionate person. But I've learned over the years in my leadership to learn to put reins on passion. And if you imagine that passion is like a wild horse, and I'll tell you actually the circumstance that it came from, because it's quite important, the context. I had started Mercy in the UK, and I was giving it my all. I was absolutely committed 100% to seeing this thing come off the ground, and it wasn't easy. But I also had 2 young children, and I had a husband who is the CEO himself and was working long hours, and I gave it my all to the point where we were just ships passing in the night, co-parenting. The ministry and the passion that drove me was primary, and it caused actually quite a lot of tension for us in our marriage, in our relationship, in the way I was relating to the kids, because I kept throwing the God card. Like, this is my call. This is what God's called me to do. This was an answer to a cry of my heart, saved my sister's life. This is what I'm supposed to do this. And every time we would have I'll call it a discussion. Every time we would have discussions about this in our home, I would throw that card. How can you oppose this? This is God. And we had one particular discussion one night, and I decided that we'd had enough of the discussion. I was going to get in the car and have a long drive and rant at God about how inadequate my husband was for dealing with the passion of getting this thing off the ground. And that's when God said to me something that changed my life and saved my marriage, which was, and I've taken it with me into my whole leadership journey, which was, I only have you to be his wife. I only have you to be a mother to the 2 children I've given you. I can ask anyone to do what you're doing at Mercy.
Wow.
And I was like, wait, what?
Yeah.
No, you don't understand. This is, you've given this anointing and call to me. No, I've anointed you and called you to be wife, mother, then you can do this. And he said, if you don't get it right, I'll take Mercy out of the equation and make it easy for you. And that's when I had this visual of the horse of passion. And passion will lend you speed. Passion will jump you over obstacles that others will come up against, but you haven't even seen them, because passion just took you right over it. And passion will help you rally troops, and passion will help you see further than other people can see, sitting on that horse of passion. But if you don't put reins on it, passion will also trample flowers you're supposed to protect. It will ride you past landscape that God's put there for you to enjoy, and you'll end up in a place you were never meant to be at a time you were never meant to be, because you never learned to put reins on passion. And so that's what I'll say about passion.
Oh, that's so helpful. I think about the kind of culture that we tend to celebrate. I mean, I was part of a ministry stream called Passion for quite a long time. And we think about sort of elevating passion and, again, rekindling fire. Sometimes it can feel a bit out of control. And we almost enjoy that, or we celebrate that as that God at work. But you bring together that idea of like God's responsibility, and if you like, the order in the chaos of life and ministry. Looking back now, I mean, you've done more than 20 years as CEO of Mercy, and you said there's a change coming. We'll talk about that in a minute. What do you wish you'd known now that you didn't know at the start?
Well, to be honest with you, if I'd have known then what I know now, I wouldn't have started.
Okay.
So it's probably good that I didn't know then. I was very young and very passionate and very full of the joys of, I'm going to change the world. And so I just did every day as it came. I think if I'd have thought the responsibility. You know, we don't charge for our services. It is the craziest business plan. We don't charge. We tithe 10% of our unrestricted donations, and we don't take any government funding that would dilute the message of the gospel of Christ, because it's Christ who sets people free. So, and we still have that, even though the home's closed, we still have that as part of our program. So any business person will tell you that is the craziest business plan everyone's come up with. To not charge, to give your money away and be fussy about where it comes from in the first place shouldn't work. And so the journey of what it means to live by faith, because we all say we live by faith, or we should, but until you're in a position where you can't fulfill the demand of what is expected with your own resources, that's when you know what faith is. Because the constant tension of not being able to meet what's expected without understanding that that's exactly what faith looks like, being outside of your comfort stroke control zone all the time, is kind of where I've learned to live. It's been a long time since I've seen land. I'm just out on the open ocean somewhere.
Wow. Okay. I mean, that's a really great descriptor of faith, and I think we probably. I mean, I know I would lean back into sort of like I've got faith, but also I'm kind of comfortable between the margins of control, and getting to like sort of find ourselves in a place of like, I've got faith, but also I know I'm safe if things don't go right. But you've lived a lot of that time sort of beyond the edge. What's that done to you spiritually, do you think?
I know who God is to me. I think in the early days, I used to often bring the needs of the residents and of the ministry and say to God, I know you won't let them down. I know that you will provide for the work that you've called us to, start. This is your work, your ministry. You're going to provide for them. You're going to provide for it. And I had to learn, and God, in fact, withheld quite a long time until I got to a point where I realized that I knew God could, and I knew he would for them, but did I think he would for me? And so learning to trust, see, faith and trust is actually the same thing. You can pretty much use that word, interchangeably. If you say you're living by faith, what you're actually doing is you're living by trust, trusting that God is who he says he is, trusting that you are who he says he is, and building that relationship with him where I know who he is.
That's amazing. That's so encouraging. You mentioned a little earlier, and it's quite new news to me as well, that you are on a journey of transition. We often don't get succession right in Christian leadership, in my experience. It often feels like a challenge to kind of find the succession journey. It often feels like a challenge for many people to let go of the leadership, particularly the ministry that they've generated or developed over a number of years. And so that can often leave leaders in the hot seat, maybe without vision or energy or purpose, whilst not letting go of whatever it is and passing it on to the next generation. What have you decided, and how's that work for you? Because as I say, obviously being so passionate about the transformation of people in Jesus' name, seeing young people come to know Jesus and see their lives change materially, mentally, emotionally as a result of that encounter, that hasn't left you, but you are moving away from the ministry that you founded. So tell me a bit about your succession process.
Well, when you say, and we all do this is yours, Lord. This is yours, this is your ministry, this is your, I am yours, everything I do is for you. We say these things all the time, and they don't actually mean anything until God calls you upon it and goes, okay, if it's mine, then can you lay it down? And that's really what God did. And I'm very aware of the founder trap, where if you're someone who's founded something and you're 21 years in, I've been raising leaders under me for the 21 years, and in particular Debbie, who's the COO, and she's been alongside me for 20 years, and she's 10 years younger, and I'm looking ahead to the future of the ministry, and it's got to grow, it's got to live beyond me. And there comes a point when the ministry doesn't need a visionary kind of let's do lots of new things. There comes a point when what we've got works, and it works. And now what we need is someone who's going to build that, who's going to get it across Europe, which we're already doing. There's 5 nations that are already, we're already based in. And that requires a different leadership style and a different leader, and recognizing that and going, if this is God's, and God is saying, I need a new style now, and it's her, then I would not be true to my word and my promise to God and what I've been saying if I wasn't then prepared to lay it down. And so I'm not going to say it's easy, because again, I'm also a coaching psychologist, so I understand the psychology behind this and how easy it is as leaders to wrap our identity and our worth and our value in what we do, what we deliver on, what we've built, and the impact. We can go to bed at night going, I've done a good job today. There's more people who have who are closer to Jesus because of something I've done. And you can get a value from that you have to be really aware of. And so just being obedient and hearing the voice of God say, it's time. He gave me very clear pictures, which we don't have time to go into, but lots of really clear word, really clear direction. For about 3 years, he's been developing something else in me anyway, which I thought was just going to be something on the side, which I think is going to become more mainstream. And just recognizing the life stages of leadership as well. And, it's come at a really good time with me. The kids have both left home now. We're empty nesting. And it just feels like it is 21 years. That's how long it takes to grow an adult. It's roughly how long it takes to grow an adult organization, I think. And I think it's time for me to have a different relationship with Mercy, which will be, I'll go on the board.
Yeah.
So I'm not, hands aren't totally off. I'll go on the board. I'm already on the board in America. I'll be on the board. I am in the board in Canada and Europe. So my relationship with it's changing.
Yeah.
And just understanding that it doesn't have to be all in or all out. Sometimes there's a way where you just alter and adjust as you go along, so that you're bringing through the next generation, but at the same time not leaving it completely abandoned. And so just working out the nuances of that.
Yeah, I've got so much out of that area. So helpful. I think one of the first things that the issue of ownership is really powerful spiritually. Like, this is your ministry, Lord. And I know lots of clergy who I look after, they're caught in the trap of saying, this is yours, Lord, but also I'm responsible for everything here, which often locks them into, it's yours, but I'm responsible for it, versus actually it's yours, and so you're responsible for it. And that looks slightly different. I think that's a really important nuance. The second thing, I think, was really the thing that you described about growing leaders for years. And the growing your succession for years. And that's something that we so often neglect, is actually, we're so busy in it, leading it, that we forget that we're actually growing it to give it away. And I know you've done that really well at Mercy. And I guess that's another encouragement for leaders, both in organizations and in the church, to think, even if you're like 2 years into your plant or into your church or into your organization, start building the leaders for your succession at the start, because then they'll be your leaders at the end. Whereas if you get to the end and go, right, I need to look around and find a leader who can take this over, you're probably not going to find the person that you need, because they aren't going to be aligned to your organization. So that was the second thing that's really powerful. And I think the third was, for me, was recognizing that you were the perfect person to get this organization to where it's got to, but you're not the perfect person to take this organization on to where it needs to be. And I think, again, there's that heart connection of like, but I got it here. I'm the visionary. I organized it to this place, but actually recognizing that we are deficient to our future vision. And that's so hard, particularly when an organization is moving from inspirational to operational. But it requires a completely different skill set. It's why I spend a lot of time dealing with big organizations, is that the founder mentality of like, oh, I know exactly what I'm doing. They've built something fantastic that's got them to this position, but they're still leading out of inspiration, and they need to leave it out of operation. And that's, obviously, I know you as a visionary leader, and operational stuff, pushing that in a different direction, or finding the leader that's going to take that forward. I think that's fantastic. So those three things really struck me really hard.
I think there's a window as well that you have to pay attention to, because if the founder and leader stays too long, then the leaders who they have grown, and you can be really good growing of leaders, they come up so close to you that if you don't move out of the way, they'll go elsewhere. And I've seen that happen in lots of different settings, where the senior leaders have stayed in position too long. So the ones they've grown up have had to go elsewhere, or they've lost their sharpness. They've become so dull and they just follow in the footsteps. They don't bring what they were bringing, because they're just kind of resigned to always being under that senior person. And so recognizing when the window is, this is the ideal time now to step out, even though I feel a little young to stop and a little old to start. I mean, that really weird bit. But for them and for her, it's definitely the right time for her to go full pelt ahead. She's ready for the pole position.
Amazing. That's really, thank you for sharing that really important news with us here. I think the first probably to hear it or outside of the organisation. Just in the last couple of minutes, just be great to hear a bit more from you about that idea of going again, and maybe personally what you're excited for in your journey of faith, as well as practically, so I think we're a similar age. I think we're approaching quite big birthdays or thereabouts.
Mine was 3 years ago.
Was it 3 years ago? It's slightly ahead of me, but to go again, and what's the Lord saying to you, and how are you connecting with both vision for that and also connecting with a new energy or passion for that? We to sort of dovetail where we started today.
Yeah, I can see a wide open space, and I've had lots of conversations with the Lord recently about this, and at the minute, I'm like, can I just have a timeout first, God, please? Okay. So I'm definitely eager for a little bit of space and a little bit of time, which I think is a healthy part of change and transition. Going from one thing to the other isn't always the healthiest way to launch whatever it is that God's calling us into next. And so having some deliberate, intentional time to create a closure before you open a new thing. It's a little bit like I have a whole framework I've been developing called the 4-door framework about the kind of psychological impact of change and transition on leaders. I've been living it, so I'll write about it when I have a chance. But there's definitely one of the doors that we go through is similar to one you find in the airport. When you get to where you're going, you have to go through one that says that this is the point of no return. And the door closes, a little glass corridor, and something closes behind you, then you're in a little glass corridor, and then the next door opens in front of you. And it's like being really intentional and aware and mindful of the fact of what stage you're in as a leader, and recognizing that if you're going into a huge transition into something new like I am, then I have to also allow things to close. And to have the courage to allow them to close. There's lots of scriptural references for that. People who, was it Elijah or Elisha? I always get mixed up. One of them, he burnt his plow and he literally, killed the oxen. That was his way of allowing that glass door to close. Yeah. And to really be, to not have a plan B, to not like, I'll just keep my, and I am on the board, so I've got a little bit of a thing. But it's just having that courage to go, there's a little bit in between here that I don't know yet. And that's where I am really. Yeah. So it's not like I'm straight away into something new. I'm going to have a little glass corridor of not sure, something's closing, and I'll wait until the next thing opens.
And that maybe goes back into that issue of control and trust.
Yeah.
Actually, professionally, I would say to people, don't leave your job until you've got a new job. But spiritually, it's often, no, leave and then find out what the Lord has for you next. And actually that position of trust, being able to let go and let God open up again a new path for you is putting your hand into the hand of God and stepping into the unknown. Yeah. We're so grateful, Ari. Thank you so much. And thanks for sharing this and just being vulnerable. I know it's going to be helped so many people here today. Ariana Walker, everyone. Let's give her a really big round of applause. Ari, thank you so much. Thank you. Oh. Thank you so much for being with us on this week's episode of the Good Leader Podcast Live. We hope you enjoy that amazing opportunity to hear more from Ariana Walker, and we look forward to seeing you next time.